The courtroom was alive with energy, but this time, it wasn't the usual tense silence that accompanied high-stakes trials. No, this time, the air was filled with smug laughter and arrogant whispers, the unmistakable confidence of three corrupt police officers who believed, once again, they had outplayed the system. Mike Reynolds, Greg Carter, and Tom Willis sat back in their chairs, grinning, relaxed, knowing they had once more dodged the grasp of justice. The judge, showing little emotion, tapped his gavel. Case dismissed. A wave of cheers erupted from the officer's side of the room. Mike smirked, clapping Greg on the back. "Another day, another victory," he said, his voice dripping with confidence. Greg chuckled, shaking his head. "They actually thought they could take us down?" Tom leaned back, arms crossed, his grin widening. "Man, I love this job." For months, the three had been under intense scrutiny, accused of racial profiling, excessive force, and even planting evidence on innocent black citizens. But as always, their deep-rooted connections in powerful places ensured that the case against them crumbled before the truth could ever see the light of day. Key witnesses suddenly refused to testify. Crucial footage mysteriously disappeared. Every road to justice was blocked. And just like that, they walked free. They stood up, stretching like men who had just finished another day at the office, ready to leave their troubles behind. But before they could step out, the heavy courtroom doors swung open. A man entered. Not just any man, a figure whose presence alone commanded respect. He was well-dressed, sharp brown eyes scanning the room with an intensity that made even the boldest men uneasy. His neatly trimmed beard framed a face of sheer determination. There was no mistaking it. This was a man with a purpose. The judge cleared his throat, his voice cutting through the murmurs. "Before we conclude today's session, I have an announcement." The room went silent. The judge continued. "As of today, the city has appointed a new chief of police. Please welcome Chief Jamal Brooks." The entire courtroom seemed to shift. The laughter from moments ago?
Gone.
Mike, Greg, and Tom stiffened, their faces draining of color. Jamal Brooks, the same black man they had once falsely arrested. The man they had mocked, humiliated, and treated like dirt.
And now?
He was their new boss. Jamal stepped forward, his voice smooth but firm. "Gentlemen, I look forward to working with you." Mike swallowed hard. Greg's fake confidence wavered. Tom clenched his fists, jaw tight. This wasn't how today was supposed to go. The celebration was over. The very next morning, Mike, Greg, and Tom arrived at the precinct. But something was different. The usual cocky stride they carried? It was gone. The station, once their playground, now felt foreign, unfamiliar. Everyone in the department had heard the news. Jamal Brooks was now in charge. And he had plans. As they walked in, officers stood at attention, nodding respectfully toward their new leader. Jamal stood at the front of the room, hands clasped behind his back, dressed in full uniform. His badge gleamed under the fluorescent lights, but it wasn't just the uniform that held power. It was him. His mere presence sent a clear message. Things were about to change. Then his voice rang out. "Reynolds,
Carter,
Willis." The three flinched. Jamal gestured for them to step forward. They hesitated. Then, with no choice, they walked toward him, the bravado they once carried nowhere to be found. Greg forced an uneasy smile. "Chief Brooks, it's great to have you here." Jamal tilted his head slightly. "Is it?" Mike cleared his throat, struggling to find the right words. "Absolutely. We're ready to serve under your leadership." Jamal didn't respond right away. Instead, he placed a thick folder on the table in front of them. He tapped the cover once. Hard. Inside, their records. Every complaint, every buried report, every crooked act they thought had been erased from existence. Evidence. All of it. Tom's hands turned clammy. His breath came quicker. "Chief, listen, save it." Jamal's voice was sharp. Cutting. "You've abused your power for far too long." Greg wiped the sweat from his forehead. "Chief, we were just following." Jamal's eyes darkened. Following what? The law.
He scoffed. No.
You were following corruption.
Greed.
Racism. But today, he exhaled. That ends. The room was still. Some officers watched with satisfaction. Others, with shock. Jamal folded his arms. Effective immediately, you're all suspended pending an internal investigation. Mike's jaw dropped. Suspended? Jamal nodded. This department will no longer protect criminals in uniform. And you three? You're finished. The weight of those words crashed down on them like a collapsing building. The very system they had manipulated was now turning against them. 2 weeks later, the entire city was talking, but not about rumors, about action. Jamal Brooks wasn't just making empty promises. He was tearing down the old, corrupt system and rebuilding something better. The investigation? It unearthed everything. Reports of excessive force, illegal searches, false arrests, even stolen money from evidence lockers. Witnesses who once feared retaliation, they finally came forward. The city had had enough. And Mike, Greg, and Tom? They weren't walking free this time. They were arrested, dragged into the very courtroom where they had once laughed, celebrated, mocked the system. But this time, there were no high fives, no smug grins, no easy escape. The prosecutor stood tall, his voice firm. Officer Reynolds. Officer Carter. Officer Willis. You are charged with misconduct, abuse of power, falsifying evidence, and multiple counts of racial discrimination. The courtroom was packed. Journalists scribbled notes. Protesters filled the back rows, eyes burning with anticipation. Justice was here. The judge, this time not under their influence, was stern. How do you plead? Mike swallowed hard. Not guilty. Greg's hands trembled. This is a... The prosecutor cut him off. We have video footage, sworn statements, forensic evidence. The truth is clear. The jury deliberated for only an hour. When they returned, the foreman stood. His voice was firm. Guilty. The room erupted.
Cheers. Claps. Tears.
The people who had suffered for years finally had justice. As the officers were led away in handcuffs, Greg turned to Jamal, sneering. You set us up. Jamal smirked.
No.
You set yourselves up. I just let the truth come out. Mike glared. Enjoy this while you can. We'll be back. Jamal's gaze was unwavering.
No.
You won't. The door slammed shut. The reign of corruption was over. And Chief Jamal Brooks? He was just getting started.